Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mayor Erica A. Stewart, and I am here to say that all of my city council member colleagues are here in person, and we will get going with the Pledge of Allegiance with Councilmember Boswell. So today is a special meeting. We will, and because it's a special meeting, we will only be accepting public comment on these three items. So as far as our consent agenda, we have one item on our consent agenda. There was agenda correspondence sent, just a few updates of, I guess, grammar and updated of vocabulary, but still the true same intention. Vice Mayor Shoresman?
Yeah, I don't quite know how to do this since we only have one item on consent, but I would like to pull this item from consent.
That was going to be my questions. That works out quite well. So we'll just go ahead and pull that and start discussing it right now. What I was hoping, and I didn't actually ask you, City Clerk, ahead of time, is it possible to put that up? Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Hardnett, sorry. I don't know why. Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much. So we're just a few kind of suggestions that many of us had put forth, and so I'm thankful very much to the staff to kind of just wordsmith it a little bit outside of our adding the commas and semicolons up here and bringing that back to us. So with that, if you've had a chance to read this, fantastic. If not, you can scroll through this real quickly. And if you have any questions first before we go to public comment, of course, Councilmember Francis. No question. Yes question. There you go.
Yeah. This is kind of a, well, maybe not a question so much for staff, but just something to ponder on the council up here. I was looking for where we might include some climate or environmental justice language, whether it belonged in DEI or down in our open space climate action resilience section, but wanted to just throw out the idea that some language around climate justice probably belonged somewhere in one of those two places.
And are you, I guess, I feel like this is more of a deliberation conversation that, okay, then we'll chat about on that one next. Thank you. Councilmember Marks. Nope, just kidding.
A deliberation comment, and I won't do it, so, okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Without any other questions for staff, then I'll bring us forward to public comment. Is there any public comment on this topic only?
No, there's not.
All right, and before we get going any further, I also wanted to make sure that the community knew that there are these little yellow slips right there in front of our city clerk's desk. And so if you have any public comment that you'd like to share, please go ahead and put your name on there, and we'll get that included in the process. So now moving forward to the deliberation, and I think we'll just go ahead and kick off with Councilmember Francis's question. And I will just say, initially, my initial response to that, or initial thought of that, is that seems more of our legislative, legislative platform, more than priority, but that's just my personal 2 cents. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I guess my question, I think back to you, I'm not opposed to it. I think, we probably fundamentally all do agree in climate justice. I'm just wondering, what does that mean to you? That has a lot of it's kind of almost a term that people sort of in that world use. And so maybe you could just describe it a little bit more, what you would mean by that. and how it would fit in here.
Yeah, thank you for the question. What brought it front of mind was we currently have a program in conjunction with Capslo retrofitting people's homes to bring in electrification in areas where they might not have heat or air conditioning currently in their homes. And this typically is impacting our lower income neighbors. And this is something that we're actively pursuing, getting grants for. We've been talking a lot about some of our disaster preparedness and ensuring that we have things like cooling centers and ways to evacuate people in an event of an emergency that might not otherwise have transportation. All of those things felt like really kind of fell under the umbrella to me of climate justice or environmental justice. Environmental justice being a slightly kind of bigger umbrella when we're just talking about how people in disadvantaged communities are disproportionately impacted by environmental impacts, climate specifically, so we could put either of those languages would work for me. So I was going to just toss out, and if we wanted to wordsmith a little bit what that would look like, but I guess we need consensus that people think it belongs first.
Thank you for that clarification.
I think, given that explanation, I think especially maybe on the third bullet under open space, climate action and resilience, where it says strengthen community resilience through emergency preparedness, community networks and planning efforts, maybe it's, with a, special attention to underserved or underrepresented groups or something to that effect. I'm agreeable to adding a bullet or to changing the wording on a bullet in order to add a concept around that. I think it matches well with either DEI or open space and climate resilience, and I'm just picking a spot where it could go.
And also livability. We also have, in the housing realm of it.
True. Yeah, it could go any of those places. The thing that I wanted to mention is that, there's two things that I wanted to sort of throw out to the group. Under infrastructure and sustainable transportation, the one area that I feel like is missing that we are doing a lot of work in, case in point, item tonight, transit. We didn't mention anything about mass transportation, and so I would maybe recommend, and here's just some language to think about, a bullet that says support policies and programs aimed at expanding and improving mass transportation. So throwing that out to the group. And then also under homeless response, I think, that second bullet there that was revised to continuum of shelter and housing programs. I feel like we talked pretty clearly about separating housing and homelessness in our major city goal workshop. And I feel like there are some bullets down below in housing and neighborhood livability that kind of pretty clearly, I think, hit at our interest in building and creating all types of housing along the continuum. But what I do think is missing from that second bullet is a support for things that support people that are homeless other than shelter and crisis response. So I would say leverage external funding to expand crisis response and continuum of shelter and prevention, outreach, those types of services. I don't have the exact wording off the top of my head, but something that kind of gets at the services as well as the shelter.
I definitely hear you on the wraparound services that we've talked about, partner with all of the different programs we do. So I'm definitely open to that. Councilmember Marks.
Oh, thank you. I just want to address Councilmember Francis' environmental justice comment. I think it's in our climate action plan. I think it's actually in the climate action plan. So when we're talking about implementation of the climate action plan and lead by example plan work programs, it's kind of in there. If you feel like there's a need to call it out specifically, we could do that, but I think it will come back to us in the work plans. So I'm a little concerned that we don't start expanding too much at this point. And to address what Michelle Shorsman was saying, perhaps we could just insert the word services in the second bullet on homelessness response, so that it would say continuum of shelter and housing services program with regional partners.
Would it be,
If that would
not to
do-
get into the commas, but would it be shelter, comma, housing and services? Because it's not just housing services, it's different types of services for the individual who is unhoused or potentially about to be unhoused.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So you could say with regional, say including wraparound services. And then I think it looks pretty good in general, and adding, calling out mass transportation is fine with me as the additional bullet with infrastructure and sustainable transportation. So it would be like support improvements in mass transportation. Would that be good enough?
I said support policies and programs aimed at expanding and improving mass transportation. That's just the sentence
Okay,
that I wrote.
That's fine. Okay, that's all I have.
Councilmember Boswell?
Yeah, just, I was generally happy with the proposed, the initial proposal and the recommended changes. The one addition I had as well was to get something in about transit. And so Vice Mayor Shorsman's recommendation there, I would support that. And I'm open to the other suggestions as well as adding something on climate justice, although I do agree, I'm quite sure it's in the climate plan now. And also the suggestions on clarifying the homelessness response language is supportive of that as well.
So my 2 cents around the transportation is, yes, public transit, i.e. what we're talking about today, but similar to the climate action plan, isn't public transit as a part of our active transportation plan as well? And when we're talking about changing our multimodal shift, Vice Mayor?
Transit is maybe minorly called out in the active transportation plan, but it's really about walking and biking infrastructure. So, and we have other transit plans.
Yes, we do.
But I just think, you know, if we look at these bullet points as sort of representations of what our key areas of interest are, that seemed like a gap to me.
Great. Well, I'm comfortable with that then, because I just wanted to make sure, because I feel like it's been part of our conversation of shifting the multimodal is, obviously public transit was part of that, but I hear you in that, so I'm comfortable with that. Councilmember Francis, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely agree, especially as we watch CAP slows federal funding concerns as well. And I do get concerned with, as we start expanding what's already in our language, and I feel like with our climate action plan, that climate justice that you're describing is already in there, but I also feel as if we were to scroll down just a little bit, sorry, Natalie, a little bit further, or maybe it's up, it's the housing livability one. There we go. I think also with ensuring housing is safe, healthy, and affordable, I feel like there's some ways that we could kind of tie that in there when I'm thinking about our policies and priorities, because I think the healthy part is really when we come into that, and the safety as well when it comes to emergency preparedness. And we also had emergency preparedness in another part of our page. Thank you, Natalie. The implement disaster mitigations from risks from floods and fires. So I just feel like a lot of what you were describing is in here, but maybe just not succinctly in that way. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. My initial inclination was that it belonged in DEI because I think, as you pointed out, we're looking at potentially programs that touch a lot of these different categories. And I know we mostly have 4 bullets under each one, but there are exceptions in here. So I think, you know, when I did a quick count on my hand, just kind of thinking about the different programs we have going right now or are looking at funding in the coming cycle, I was looking at 4 or 5 different programs that specifically targeted climate or environmental justice. And they weren't all in housing. Some of them, of course, were in disaster preparedness. And so because they bridged a couple of different worlds, and because they are something that we continually are funding as a priority, I really would love to see it called out specifically as a focus here. And I would love for it to live in DEI if possible. And then coming around to Vice Mayor Shorsman's recommendation to include the transit bullet, very much in favor of that. And under homelessness response, I don't want to lose the word housing in there, but I do like the idea of including the word services. So shelter, housing, and service programs would, just kind of as a simple comma, a simple addition. I would love to see the word services added into that bullet.
Could we just say services and not say programs?
Sure, that's great.
Cool.
Continuum of shelter, comma, housing, comma, services, and services with regional partners. I think that works. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I just jotted down some notes to try to clean up the language on a bullet for the homelessness one. I would still not put housing in there just because we did separate housing and we've got promote and expand and diversify housing opportunities, but I'm also not opposed to leaving it in there. But my language was leverage external funding with regional partners to expand crisis response and the continuum of shelter and support programs.
I like that. Councilmember Marks?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, there's such a thing as supportive housing, like what TEMA does, and
I don't think it's left out by not specifically calling that out in the housing and neighborhood livability bullets, but again, we could.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that I think that what you proposed would include supportive housing.
Got it. Yeah.
And so supportive housing to me, it's fine if we put it in the homeless response, because otherwise with housing and neighborhood livability, we're talking about people who, we're talking about our neighborhoods, really, frankly. So, yeah, good. Well, I have nothing more, so I'm gonna.
All right, well, on that note, can we go forward and can I move this? I will move this our major city goals and priorities. Consent item 4A. 4A. Sorry about that. I'll move that. Is there do you have a city manager? Do you have something in between before we start to vote?
Just wanted to get clarity to make sure that we're taking forward what is being voted on. And so I think there are some revisions to that second bullet under homelessness response that Vice Mayor Shorsman kind of read into the record. Sounded like.
I'll make the motion and then I can also
Perfect.
email you the language of the bullet, but I would move approval of the modified goals bullet points here with the addition of the mass transportation bullet added and the revisions to the homeless response bullet number 2 that I read out loud, leverage external funding with regional partners to expand crisis response and the continuum of shelter and support programs. That's my motion.
Great, I'll second that. Thank you. Did you have something to add, Councilmember Francis? Sorry.
Just going to put in one more plug for including some language around environmental justice or climate justice in the DEI section, since I'm not hearing it as part of the motion.
Yeah, I didn't hear it as part of the majority of input. Vice Mayor, we do have a motion on the table.
Can I ask a question of staff? I meant to ask while the motion's on the table. With the climate action plan, the question that was brought up before was that there are lots of climate justice items in the climate action plan. In order to make sure that there are climate justice and the types of programs that Councilmember Francis was asking about are included in the work plan. Do you feel like it's necessary to add that as a separate bullet?
So we do have, as mentioned, the Climate Action Plan does speak to climate justice and social equity. And then our DEI strategic plan includes a provision about supporting the implementation of the Sustainability and Natural Resources Office Major City Goal climate justice initiatives impacting vulnerable populations. So it's a bit of a circular, one supports the other. And so we would continue to do that work called out in the strategic plan. I guess what I don't know is what the specific programs were or are in mind for inclusion in here. It could call out a totally different line of effort. So that's the only thing that I'm not totally sure about.
Yeah, so the programs that came to mind when I was thinking about including the language had to do with the housing retrofits, and then some of our work around our hazard mitigation, our evacuation plans, those types of things. And because they were in so many different worlds, that's why I was advocating for it to live in the DEI section. I'm really glad that it's called out in the Climate Action Plan, but I might argue that most of these bullets belong or live in some other plan. So I'm calling it out as a specific point of interest that I think is a focus, has been a focus of this council, and I just want to make sure that that language is kind of front and center.
Do you wish to withdraw your motion at this time, Vice Mayor, to have more deliberation? Or do you wish to move forward?
I think if Councilmember Francis, do you have some specific language that you would want to add? If so, I will withdraw my motion and we can add the language. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
City Manager, maybe you could read that language that you just did. That was sort of the circular language. I thought that both in the DEI and in the climate action that kind of echoed from one another.
So this language comes from the DEI strategic plan, and it says support the implementation of the Sustainability and Natural Resources Office Major City Goal climate justice initiatives impacting vulnerable populations.
So supporting climate justice initiatives might be a bullet that I would feel comfortable with there, just as a nice blanket that covers a lot, both of the retrofits, but also sort of the climate response type stuff that we're doing.
Councilmember Marks?
Yeah, possibly to just say on that second bullet, facilitate programs and initiatives to support diverse community engagement and representation, comma, and support climate justice initiatives, or including climate justice initiatives. Just tagging it on there with as few words as possible.
Versus an entire additional bullet. I like that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Francis, how do you feel about that?
Happy with.
Okay.
Happy with that as long as it shows up somewhere.
All right, would you like to amend your motion, Vice Mayor?
That was a roundabout way to get to, I will withdraw my motion and make a new motion adding the language.
Great. I will still second that, and we can move forward. Can we have roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Shorsman,
Yes.
Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Francis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Boswell.
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate reducing the amount of times to discuss commas and grammars and words, but we still managed to get it in there. But no, this is a great, in all seriousness, this is a great opportunity when people look at our city and look at our website and look at our priorities and say, what does this city stand for? What are the budget plans? Where are you putting your money towards? Where are the work plans going? This is very clear. So thank you for that. So moving forward, we now have the 2024 legislative briefing. So kind of year-end review, which typically we have in February, but with the budget, we had so many, I'm sorry, typically we have in January, but with the budget, we had so many additional meetings that were pushed out a little bit to have this briefing. Looking forward to Deputy City Manager Greg Herman and Policy and Programs Manager Natalie Harnett.
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. We're happy to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the legislative briefing and the city's legislative program. And we'll give a brief overview of this year's state legislative session and also kick off our work for the following year. We have two different recommendations for the council this evening. It's first to receive and file a report on the adopted laws from the 23-24 session of the state legislature, and also consider the appointment of an ad hoc council committee to participate in the review and update of the city's legislative platform as we prepare for next year's, or the current year's, legislative session. So briefly, just by way of background, if folks aren't familiar with the city's legislative program, we run it out of the city manager's office in the administration and IT department. Natalie, our policy and project manager, is the lead for the program. It allows us to be able to advocate for the city's interest, in particular at the state level of government, but we have used it in the past to advocate to the federal government as well. We rely a lot on Cal Cities to help support this work as a member of that organization. And that in particular, it comes in the form of their analysis that they do for the bills, and then what that usually looks like. And I know that many of you are familiar with the requests. It is looks like emails that say urgent, opposition, or support for a selected piece of legislation. And so the legislative platform is a really helpful tool for us to be able to respond quickly to those requests. In total, the platform is effectively a set of pre-approved policy positions from the full city council that allow us to be able to then look at those different bills, understand if they fit within our legislative platform, and then work with the mayor to execute a letter of support or opposition as a part of that. It is a living document. We regularly make updates to it. Staff, as a part of the process, regardless of whether or not council decides to move forward with an ad hoc subcommittee, will review the document and make updates that we feel like are appropriate for council's consideration. But there's also the opportunity for the ad hoc subcommittee to spend some more time with the document and with Natalie and I as we work to make updates for this year. And with that, I'll hand it over to Natalie.
Thank you, Greg. Happy to be here, Mayor, Council. So just a quick look during the 23-24 regular session of the California State Legislature. Legislators and committees proposed a total of 2,200 bills. About 1,200 made it to Governor Newsom's desk. 1,100 were signed and 189 were vetoed. This is a veto rate of about 16%, which is pretty consistent with previous years. Most of the bills went into effect on January 1st, 2025. However, some of the urgency measures went into effect immediately. And some of them won't go into effect until future years. So I'll kind of point out those when we go through these as well. Just a quick look at budget stuff. As you probably remember, the state was looking at a very significant budget shortfall a year ago, and ultimately had to shift around a lot of money to balance the $47 billion deficit. The good news is that since the 2024 Budget Act was signed, the economy, stock market, and cash receipts have performed better than expected, resulting in an improved revenue forecast. However, as shown on the slide, this is from the Legislative Analyst's Office. This was the long-term forecast as of November 2024. There is still a shortage with the the expenditures outpacing revenues in the outer years. On January 10th, the governor sent the legislator his draft budget proposal for 25-26, which is balanced and is actually projecting $16.5 billion in additional revenues above the expectations over the next 3 years. However, as we know, the projections can be quite volatile and still pretty uncertain at this point. So we'll see what happens over the next couple months, but overall, better than last year. Although there were some program cuts in the 2024 Budget Act, the majority of the deficit was addressed through reserved and shifting money around through the different funds. Some of the most notable cuts included $2.3 billion from environmental programs, $771 million from the state's active transportation projects, and then $1.5 billion was reduced from unspent housing and homelessness funds. However, about the same amount of funding was allocated as new funding towards other housing and homelessness programs. So I'm just going to go through each of the different categories kind of quickly and just highlight some of the bills. There was a lot of them, and if you have any questions, I can try and answer them at the end, or maybe we have folks in the room that can help. So the first is community services, behavioral health, and homelessness. Most notably, Prop 1 passed in March 2024. This measure was intended to modernize the Mental Health Services Act and allocate $6 billion in bonds for behavioral health treatment beds and supportive housing units. This is obviously going to most directly impact the county, but of course trickles down to the city and our local community. While Proposition 1 will bring an infusion of resources at the state level, there is a lot of concern about how this is going to impact the county's existing resources. A lot of that existing tax revenue for SLO County that they would have received directly is now going to be shifted to the state under the new priority. So there's still some uncertainties there. AB 2574 and AB 2080 were supporting measures to go along with Prop 1. Both were aimed at increasing accountability and transparency for rehab facilities and sober living homes. These are intended to close some of the loopholes and gaps that the state has been seeing in some of the existing facilities. The city advocated in support of both of these during the legislative session. Lastly, I'll mention SB 1361. This exempts local agencies from CEQA requirements for homeless services programs. Not a huge impact from this one, but it may help accelerate some of the program implementation for certain contracts, such as counseling, security, and resource navigation. Environmental quality, so energy and climate change remain a focal point for the legislature and the upcoming session as well. They're going to continue to aggressively address some of the crucial issues, including electricity affordability and climate adaptation. AB 98 was the big one this year that got a lot of attention towards the end of the session. It was strongly opposed by local agencies, including our own. This was a gut and amend bill introduced late and after months of closed door conversations. So essentially, the bill requires cities to update their circulation elements by 2028 to accommodate for increased traffic related to major truck routes. This has become an issue, particularly in areas of the Central Valley, where there's large Amazon warehouses that have been built. While the full impact on the city isn't quite clear at this point, we do know that cities could be subject to up to $50,000 every 6 months if their circulation elements are not in compliance. So this update alone is a huge work effort, not to mention the increased signage and stuff that will need to be installed. So Cal Cities has an in-depth section in there in the report if you want to read more, but that's just an overview. There's a handful of solid waste and recycling bills that mostly are designed to ensure that cities meet their SB 1383 targets. Fortunately, the city is reaching those targets, so not a huge impact for us directly. There's also a couple bills that you may have heard of that will affect our city residents' behaviors. So AB 1053 makes additional changes to the single-use carryout bag restrictions. And this is designed to kind of navigate some of those loopholes that retailers are using. So it'll essentially require stores to stop offering both the single-use plastic bags and those thicker plastic reusable bags, which are just using more plastic. So if a consumer does decide to purchase a bag, it will have to be made out of 50% recycled material. SB 2080 is another one that's going to require those smaller propane cylinders that you would bring camping or something to be reusable or refillable by January 2028. Prop 4 is a big one that passed in November, and SB 867 enacted the bill. This measure will allow the state to issue $10 billion in bonds for projects related to safe drinking water, wildfire prevention, drought preparation, flood protection, among other things. While we don't know exactly how this is going to impact us, we are looking forward to seeing what kind of grant opportunities might be in store. Lastly, AB 1889 is a significant one that will require us to update our conservation open space element to ensure that we are mitigating any negative impacts on our wildlife connectivity. The city's current plan is nearly 20 years old, so it does need to be updated, but this will be a big work effort for staff in the coming years, and we have until 2028 to make those updates. So housing, community development, community and economic development, this is always a big one with a lot of legislation intended to try and drive housing construction. However, as we've experienced, while well-intended, these bills can really impact the city's local authority and planning procedures. So I'll go through some of them at a high level, but I believe our community development director is here if you have additional questions. AB 3093 is a bill that creates 2 new income categories that the city will have to report out on its regional housing needs allocation and next housing element update. The purpose of these new categories is to include those experiencing homelessness into the counts. However, the city actually wrote a letter of opposition to this bill because the housing element law already requires cities to analyze the housing needs of its homeless residents. So the work is a little bit duplicative. The state is working on some additional guidance and tools on how exactly to do this, but we do expect that there will be some work effort associated with that, and we should know by December of 2026 more about this one. There were also about 9 bills related to the approval of new housing projects and housing element certification. Ultimately, we will need to ensure that our housing element meets all of these new standards, or we could be, once again, subject up to fines up to $50,000 per month. A couple notable ones are SB 1123 and SB 1211. The first one requires the city to approve subdivision of vacant single-family parcels for up to 10 units. SB 1211 requires city to approve up to 8 detached ADUs on existing multifamily dwelling lots. Staff are actually working on some zoning ordinance amendments currently that will address the requirements of both of these bills. Lastly, AB 1820 and AB 3012 are both intended to help the community get estimations on permit costs before beginning a project. So one of the things we'll need to do is provide a fee estimation calculator on our website by 2032. So we've got a while on that one, but it is a big work effort just to get that up and running. Governance, transparency, and labor relations. The biggest one is probably AB 2561. This is a bill that requires cities to report out annually on their vacancy rates, staffing vacancy rates, through a public hearing. And if the rate within a single bargaining unit exceeds 20%, then the agency also has to provide some additional supplemental information. The city's already adjusted for this, and we're actually taking an item to your council in a few weeks to comply with this law. And just as a side note, the city does not and has not historically had vacancy rates of above 20%, so it's not anticipated to be an issue at this point. SB 1181 and 1243 amend the Levine Act, which governs how officials can use campaign contributions. The most notable change is that it doubles the allowable contribution limit from $250 to $500 and extends the time frame allowed to fix contribution mistakes and updates how contributions are counted. AB 2715, 2302, and SB 1032 are all intended to enhance public meeting practices and records law. The first one allows agencies to hold closed session meetings to discuss cybersecurity issues, specifically those that might address possible threats to public services, utilities, or public right-of-way, which are becoming more relevant issues. AB 2302 updates the rules for how many meetings a member of a legislative body can attend remotely during emergencies without having to disclose that teleconference location. Right now it's a fixed 20% for all legislative bodies, so the limit will now be based on the typical amount of meetings that each body holds each month. Lastly, SB 1034 grants local agencies an extended response time of up to 14 days for public records requests received during a governor-declared state of emergency. So this is something like during the storms, for example, that would just allow staff to focus on the emergency as opposed to those public records requests. Improving public safety and specifically addressing retail theft was a top priority for Cal Cities last year. Ultimately, over 10 bills related to retail theft were passed. This is something that isn't a big concern for our community, but tends to be a bigger issue for bigger cities with more of the big box retail stores. However, the city did write a letter in support for most of these. They range from updated theft statutes to sentencing enhancements to the continuation of several state task force. SB 1064 and AB 1775 are both intended to help support the cannabis industry, which has been underperforming the state's original revenue projections. SB 1064 essentially allows businesses to conduct multiple activities under one state license. For example, they could do cultivation and retail under one license. This won't impact the city because we already have our own specifications and our own required city business license. And AB 1775 is an interesting one that actually permits cities to authorize cannabis retailers to sell non-cannabis food. So these are sometimes called cannabis lounges. So the city of SLO doesn't currently allow this type of business as part of its zoning ordinances, but if something, if we decided to allow them in the future for some reason, that could be a discussion area. Lastly, AB 3024 expands the definition under the Ralph Civil Rights Act to include unauthorized material distribution on private property as an intimidation by threat of violence. This is one that unfortunately some of our residents have dealt with in the past, and while this bill is a step in the right direction, it still wouldn't allow for criminal prosecution of the act, but residents can seek damages from the person. For revenue and taxation, nothing too significant on this. Most notably was, in fact, the California Business Roundtable Initiative, or CBRT, for the Taxpayers Deception Act did not make it to the ballot. However, we may see this one reappear in the future. This is an initiative that would have significantly restricted the city's ability to levy taxes and could have severely impacted our ability to provide services. AB 2854, this is related to sales tax agreements. It's one that Cal Cities has highlighted. It won't really impact us because we don't have any current sales tax agreements with private retailers, but if we did, or if we do in the future, we will be required to publicly post them online. SB 1059 is a bill that standardizes how local jurisdictions assess cannabis businesses' gross receipts, which is the amount that we use to calculate our annual business taxes. Essentially, it will prohibit cities from including sales tax or any state taxes in their local business calculation. So the businesses would essentially net it out from their gross revenue. This is another one that won't impact us because we already do that. Lastly, 2257 requires people to submit written objections to the city before pursuing legal actions for water or sewer fee objections. And then subsequently requires that the cities respond in writing to the objection. So the goal of this one is to push the dispute resolution process essentially back to the local level, thus streamlining the legal proceedings at the state level. Again, another one that we don't see really having a huge impact, but it is just a change in process. For transportation, communications, and public works, I've got a handful on here, but I also wanted to note the one we talked about earlier, AB 98, which is the warehouse truck route bill, is also kind of falls under this category. So AB 1777 introduces some new autonomous vehicle safety requirements, including requirements that these vehicles have dedicated emergency response telephone lines for emergency response officials. AB 2427 and SB 1418 are both intended to streamline permitting processes. One of them the first one is for electric vehicle, curbside charging stations, and AB 1418 is for hydrogen fueling stations. SB 1216 prohibits agencies from installing shared bike lanes on high-speed roadways, which is a roadway that exceeds 30 miles per hour. The city generally doesn't do this anyways, but this is something that we'll have to consider with future road design. AB 3177 is a transportation bill, but it's also designed to encourage new housing developments to be built in areas that are near major transit stops. We don't currently have any major transit stops as defined as the bill, but in summary, it would limit the city's ability to force developers to give up a certain amount of land for road widening if it's close enough to a major transit stop. It also requires agencies to adjust the transportation impact fee rates for these projects that meet this transit criteria. There's also a handful of bills related to artificial intelligence that made their way through the legislature last year, and there's also more expected. Most of these were around establishing standardized transparency and disclosure policies for AI systems. The city doesn't use that much AI in its day-to-day work at the moment. However, we do know this is a rapidly developing area, and we are actually working on developing our own organizational AI policy. To support this effort, the city is using resources from the Government AI Coalition, which is a network of hundreds of cities across the country that have collaborated to create some templates and best practices that local governments can use. Oops. Okay, that wraps up the briefing part. These are Cal City's 2025 priorities. They're very similar to last year, and they're also kind of a lot of overlap with our own city goals. So protect local revenues and expand economic development tools, strengthen climate change resiliency and disaster preparedness, strengthen and modernize critical infrastructure, secure investments to prevent and reduce homelessness, and increase the supply of affordable housing. So next steps, if council does decide to appoint an ad hoc committee, basically what that looks like is we first review our existing platform, see what has changed over the last year, if there's any new priorities that we want to add or that the council would like to add. Staff can make recommendations, council can make recommendations, and then we meet typically between like now and when the legislative platform is adopted at least once. And then present to your council the updated legislative platform for adoption in April 2025. So I will note the meeting right now is scheduled for April 1st, which is a pretty tight turnaround. So I did speak with Teresa and we can move it to the 15th. It's just a consent agenda item if we need to do that. With that, I'll bring back the recommendations.
Can you just share what was the collective government AI group you said?
Oh, the Government AI Coalition.
Coalition, thank you very much. Thank you for that full presentation. I am always amazed with the amount of bills that go through our state legislature and then how many that actually get through that we're supposed to implement is a little overwhelming at times. So I appreciate the summarization that you provided here today. Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, any public comment?
We have none.
Okay. I do want to add with the Cal City's priorities. I did attend the board meeting on Thursday and Friday, and one thing that was looked at last minute to be added on was an additional public safety priority. And one of the things that we discussed was because this request is coming after all of the community engagement that happened, all of the city engagement, all of the policy discussion, we felt that the process had been fully vetted and it didn't get to the level. But there was 100% agreement that every single city feels that public safety is one of their most important things to do in their community. So it was also, just wanted to make sure that was kind of highlighted here for this from that meeting, is that we of course believe that public safety is a core core concern and core priority for every city within the 483 cities of the state. So just wanted to highlight that and really appreciate all of the work that was on here. I also know that we have potentially less bills to look forward. Friday was the last day to put in bills for our state legislators, and sounds like we might have a little less to go through this coming year. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I'll echo gratitude for incredible work and the summaries that were really easy to digest, so I appreciated that. Just wanted to put in a plug for definitely having an ad hoc this year, you know, in light of the shifting political landscape. Hate to bring it up, but I feel like our ad hoc probably needs to take a look at our ledge platform and ensure that even though we're going to continue to focus on local and regional issues, that we have some room for advocacy on any funding decisions that might end up impacting our community, which I'm afraid we might be facing in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to have an ad hoc committee as well, and I'd be willing to volunteer if nobody else wants to do it, so, thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Shorsman.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, make a comment to sort of back you up on the amazing amount of bills that seem to come out of the legislature and how many of them seem to affect cities at the local level, but yet have no funding that comes along with it for us to do the work. So while I definitely have an appreciation for some of the things that, for many of the things that our state is trying to do, it's needs to be said that we do a lot of this work without much support. So I'm also supportive of an ad hoc committee, I guess, and I'm willing to, I was on the ad hoc committee last year, so I'm happy to cede that opportunity to somebody else this year. I did want to just sort of mention to whoever does sit on the ad hoc committee, since we continually try to coordinate with our regional partners, that maybe it would behoove the ad hoc committee to look at the county's legislative platform too and see if there, as we're developing ours, to see if there are areas where we can coordinate better or look for nexuses where we might not know they exist already. So just one thought.
Absolutely, work smarter, not harder. Thank you very much for that. Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, again, thank you to staff for the excellent staff report summarizing a lot of complex legislation, making it easy to digest. I also think it's important we have an ad hoc committee this year, and I'm interested in serving. So,
great, thank you. And along with everyone, I believe also a task force ad hoc committee would be great. I served with Vice Mayor last time, and so I'm willing to cede my position to you three to duke it out. Councilmember Francis.
Happy to serve, but I also have served on one previously, and I do strongly believe that new council members should have an opportunity. So I will battle it out here with Councilmember Marks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Marks.
Believe it or not, I've never served on an ad hoc committee. Really? So I'd like to do it, and I also really feel this is a crucial kind of interesting moment in history, and we really need to dig in. So I'd like to do it.
I would absolutely love for you to serve.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think that as we have a motion, it will be including the task force with Councilmember Marks and Councilmember Boswell. Any further discussion, or do I hear a motion coming along? Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I will move to approve staff recommendations, including appointing an ad hoc committee of Councilmember Boswell and Marks to review the legislative platform for 25-26.
Wonderful, and I do think you should include Vice Mayor's suggestions around looking at the regional platforms as well. Councilmember Boswell.
second.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
just making sure that we get that additional language around the nexus points between the county and the city's legislative platforms included in that motion.
Perfect, thank you. City Clerk, can we have roll call?
Councilmember Francis,
Yes.
Councilmember Boswell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shorsman,
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you all, and thank you very much. Well, the big reason I think a lot of us are here is the study session. I mean, I think we're always here, but the study session for the short-range transit plan. I think the draft of this transit plan has already come a long way, and really excited to hear the presentation today. For anyone who's now just joining us, just so you know, there are some yellow paper slips over here that if you wish to speak, that grab one of those and put your name on it and give it back to the city clerk. Also, if you have not had a chance to see online, there's also agenda correspondence on this topic added to the agenda packet. So with that, I will pass this on to Public Works Director Matt Horn. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to pass this on to Councilmember Marks at first.
Yes, I'm afraid I'm going to have to recuse myself from this item because my home in San Luis Ranch borders directly on the sidewalk, which is right next to Fern Ranch Way. And so I'm closer than 500 feet, whether the buses are going toward the shopping center or toward Target. So I'm going to have to recuse, and I will actually leave the meeting and go home and watch it. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks. So with that, I will bring this back to Public Works Director Matt Horn and Mobility Services Business Manager Alex Fuchs.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you so much for your time on your off Tuesday. So thank you for coming. Unfortunately,
Let's hold on that for 1 second. Councilmember Francis.
Just been informed that I also need to recuse myself because I live within 500 feet of Broad Street, which has a route that will be discussed this evening.
Thank you. Well, we're dwindling. And then there were 3. If you'd like, you can come closer. If not, you are fine. Mr. Horn, we'll go ahead and go back to you.
Madam Mayor, I fear this is something that may happen for us in the future more as slow transit has more stops around the city. So thank you for the 3 who are available for us this evening. Other thing is, unfortunately this evening, our consultant couldn't join us. Unfortunately, all transit options aren't as easy, convenient, and reliable as slow transit, and the plan that she was using the connection didn't make it. So with that, we are well represented with Jennifer Rice, our Deputy Director of Mobility Services, and Alex Fuchs, our Business Manager for Mobility Services, to review the administrative draft of our short-range transit plan, and we'll incorporate any suggestions or direction from council tonight and have the full draft for your consideration at a later date. With that, I'll give it to Alex. Thank you.
Good evening. I do want to say, though Genevieve Evans, the principal consultant on this plan update, isn't here physically, she is here remotely. I can see her. So I may call upon her if there's highly technical questions or questions about some of the analysis that she's done. Otherwise, the presentation will be done mostly by myself. So recommendations are to receive and provide feedback on the administrative draft of Slow Transit's short-range transit plan, and to direct staff to make any necessary changes, and then return with a final plan ready for adoption April 15th. I throw this slide in pretty much every presentation about the short-range transit plan just to help people kind of wrap their minds around it. You all saw it at the July study session, but I figured it was worth just briefly stopping on it again. The short-range transit plan is essentially a 5-year business plan or strategic plan that lays out operational changes, past program changes, capital expenditure investments we'll need to make in order to meet not only current needs, but future needs over that 5-year planning period. It's been a relatively long process, about 18 months in total. We started in September of 2023. started doing data collection in October 2023, and then about halfway through this working paper development process, there was 8 in total. We got through the 4th one, which was a service alternatives analysis. We came to you all with a study session and a check-in and to really ask, are we on the right track? Is there anything else we need to consider? We got some great feedback, and then we moved on to the second half of the plan update, which is additional service alternatives analysis, capital operating expenditure analysis, and then we started to package it all together into this plan and lay out the order of what recommendations are going to follow in which financial planning year. So we have that for you tonight. We're going to start off just with the recommended service changes and fare and pass program changes. And then as we go through the presentation, we'll sort of build and go more into the detail of each of them. I do want to point out just at the very beginning here, none of the recommendations include service along Phillips or Pepper Street. That was an error on my part. I had provided Genevieve and the LSC team with outdated information. An individual caught it, several individuals caught it. It's been updated and corrected, but I just wanted to clarify that for everybody here and listening at home. So we have a total of 7 service change recommendations. We start with restoring service levels to pre-pandemic levels, which right now that includes the 2 tripper services that are not currently in operation, the San Luis Tripper and the Highland Tripper. Through the analysis and some of the working papers, 6 Express was included in there, but that's because those papers were completed prior to September when we did reinstate the 6 Express service. So that is running. So really these 2 are just those last tripper services. Increasing service on 4A and 4B, that was something that was discussed at the study session. And it's really adding 2 runs in the morning to Cal Poly and then 2 runs in the afternoon away from Cal Poly. Route 4 is just our most popular route and for good reason. And there seemed to be a need to provide additional service there. The third one is really initially started as a combination of 2. We looked at revising Route 2A and 2B to go along Froome Ranch Way on the south end of San Luis Ranch instead of going along Madonna. And then we looked at expanding the cycle time, basically how often a bus would come, because our on-time performance was pretty bad. It was the worst on routes 2A and 2B amongst all of our fixed route services. But after looking at that and receiving feedback about how long an hour and a half can be for a local bus service, we looked at combining it into a recommendation where we essentially double the frequency. So it would still be a total of a 90-minute cycle, but a bus would come every 45 minutes instead of 90 minutes. And then when we move to year 2, it is providing service year-round, academic service year-round, so we wouldn't have that lull during the summer months. We'll get into some potential adjustments based on MTC recommendations and feedback that and news out of Cal Poly that has occurred again after some of these working papers were developed. And then operating B routes on weekends. This is something that we heard probably the earliest, and especially through the unmet transit needs assessment that SOCOG did in 2024. It was one of the most requested service expansions that we got, and for good reason. Running only half our routes on the weekends not only impacts people that work weekends, but also students as they try to get to and from campus to study, and people that are just trying to travel for leisure activities. And then year 3, based on the study session that we had, there was a request to look at new service to Avila Ranch. What would that look like? Would it be a new route? Would it be an expansion of existing route? And so there is a recommendation to establish a new route. We're calling it for now Route 5 that would travel down Higuera and then loop through the Avila Ranch development and then back up. And then of course, in year 3, launch a microtransit pilot program that, as it's conceptualized now, would be a 2-year pilot program and would mainly provide service from 10 p.m. to midnight, because another thing that we heard most frequently was there's a huge reduction in fixed route service in the evening time, and this would help sort of supplement that a little bit, with the intention or possibility of expanding it depending on how successful that pilot program is. There's also some fare and program recommendations that are included in the Shore Range Transit Plan. The first one is, it's technically a no change, but it's a recommendation to not change. And so based on a peer agency analysis, our rates as they are now are in line with the 7 peer agencies that we looked at. No one was asking us to increase them. It's Cal Poly provides through their transit service agreement a significant portion of our fares, and though it would bolster our revenue a little bit, it just didn't seem to make much sense right now. And then we have probably the broadest variety of passes, definitely amongst the agencies that we looked at. We have 1 ride, 1 day, 3 day, 5 day, 7 day, 3 multi-day passes, and then monthly passes. And the consultants looked at how frequently they were purchased, how frequently they're used, and found that the 5 and 7 day represent a very, very small portion of those pass sales. And so the plan is recommending eliminating those as well. Finally, for our programs, our Downtown Access Pass, this is something that was carried over from the Transit Innovation Study, is looking at the potential to, in this case, expand the geographic boundaries. And so the consultants looked at what our current boundaries are. They looked sort of south toward the historic district and then east toward Upper Monterey, and looked at a potential for expanding it there. And it seems like that's possible to do it within the funding parameters that is currently organized between the Parking Enterprise Fund and the Transit Fund, because they do subsidize that up to $20,000 a year. So what does this look like in numbers for our operations? Based on current year ridership operating costs, if the plan is fully implemented, there's a potential to see about a 33% increase in ridership. And then to go along with that, about a 31% increase in operating costs. But we will service all the new developments, including San Luis Ranch. We already serve Rigetti Ranch, Avila Ranch, increased service frequency, maybe not as much as some would like, but year-round, weekend, and more frequent service on the 2 and the 4 is a pretty significant increase. And then, of course, implementation of a new form of service we don't have here in IE Microtransit. It is a little bit misleading, but through all this analysis, we would need to put 6 new buses into service. I say put them into service, not buy them. We'll get into the nuances of that a little bit. And then to operate those buses, it's likely that we'll need on the high end about 15 transit workers. That makes up drivers, dispatch, road supervisors, maintenance workers to help support the ongoing operations. And then for the microtransit program, as it is envisioned through the plan, it would be operated with vans that would either, some or all of them would be ADA accessible, but it's not something that we have in our current fleet inventory. So through the pilot program, it would be a contracted service. And then if it were to be made permanent, there would be a need to buy those vehicles. So like I said, this plan update started back in October. We started with onboard surveys. We did in-person stakeholder workshop meetings. That was mainly with individuals from either other public agencies, like SLOCOG, City of Paso, county individuals. This was a joint planning effort with RTA, so we got a broad mix of individuals throughout the entire county. We also did online surveys through the city's open city hall process. It's not listed on here, but we also did stakeholder interviews with some of our contractor staff to get their feedback, not only drivers, but operators and managers, just to make sure that the consultants are hearing from every perspective on how we can improve our services. And then we convened our Mass Transportation Committee and RTA's Regional Transit Advisory Committee, not once, not twice, but 3 times to do check-ins, get feedback, but it also served as a public input opportunity. And so we did one in March, one in June, and then a final one in October. We also held 3 community workshops in June, one here, one in North County, one in South County, to invite people to look at what the service alternatives are, what some of the potential operating costs may be, expenditures that we need, and then really just to continue that dialogue throughout the plan update process. And then, like I said earlier, we came to you all in July with a study session. We'll go over some of the detailed feedback on the next slide of what we heard and digested and reported back to the consultants. And then in January, once we had a draft plan, the MTC convened and made a recommendation on which service and fare program changes should be included. And so we'll go over that as well, because there's some minor adjustments as it's recommended by the MTC as it is presented in the draft plan. And then lastly, we did some directed outreach on the previous month to some of our community partners, not only to get feedback on the draft plan, but on our current services, and then also to sort of initiate an ongoing conversation with them about how we can better provide services for their clients and to properties that they manage. So as I said, at the July study session, there was a healthy, robust conversation. Tried the best possible to boil it down to actionable items. This is what I walked away with. It was support for increased service on the 4A and 4B. I don't recall which council member, one remarked increasing service across all A routes would be highly supported as well. Analyzing a new route connecting Broad Street and Higuera along Tank Farm, analyzing service to San Luis Ranch and Avila Ranch. We did present a service alternative where we eliminated 2 stops on Route 1 and 2 stops on Route 3 to try to make those routes more efficient and improve the on-time performance. We walked away saying that was not supported if it meant eliminating service, which that alternative did. There was a support for what we call midlife rebuilds, where we take a 5, 7, 8-year-old bus, invest some dollars into it, not as much as you would to buy a brand new vehicle, and then it extends the life an additional 7 or 8 years, and you'll see that on some of the preceding slides. And then lastly, include year-round service in advance of Cal Poly's shift to their semester system. Key themes from the outreach process overall is more frequent service, later evening service, more weekend service. But when we started to get into some of the specifics, it was there are some low-income housing complexes that are further than a quarter mile from some of our routes. So that was great feedback to hear. We also heard, of course, increased service to the regional San Luis Obispo Airport. And that's been part of a broader discussion and recent regional effort that I've been a part of, is how to address the needs of flyers. And then one of the best pieces of feedback we got from the directed outreach that we did is, though our rider alerts and our press releases are produced in English and Spanish, our schedules, even though it's mostly timetables and a map, are English only, and that creates a barrier to entry. We don't have firm numbers on the number of drivers that are bilingual, but there was always that's the first person they see when they get on, and it would be great if there was a way to increase the number of bilingual drivers as well. So that's something we're in conversations with our contractor about. So shortly after the July study session, LSC produced an additional service alternatives analysis. It was basically an addendum to working paper 4, and it was going off the feedback that we got from the study session. So one of the feedback being, how do we better serve San Luis Ranch? And then how do we get service out to Avila Ranch? So they looked at several different opportunities, expanding Route 2 to serve both of them, expanding just Route 2 to serve San Luis Ranch, and then doing a new direct route. Out of all of them, and it should be no surprise because one of the first slides talked about it, but the best fit, it seems like, for the community is to revise Route 2 to continue to serve San Luis Ranch, just serve it along Froome Ranch Way, and then to make it a 90-minute cycle, and then add 2 more buses so we can operate it at a 45-minute frequency. It is a little hard to see on this map, but Madonna is in gray, and that is our existing Route 2A, 2B line. And so there would be a reduction in service along that area between LOVR and Delidio. That same stretch is also serviced by Route 3A and 3B, and our onboard data collection shows that about 88% of the riders that get off in that area are getting off a Route 3 bus. So there might be some impact to existing riders, but it'll be minimal. And then, as I mentioned, another service alternative analysis was how do we get out to Avila Ranch? And if we're not doing it with Route 2, then we looked at alternatives that included establishing a new route. One being called direct route that just is almost like a lollipop. It just goes straight down from downtown along South Higuera, loops through the Avila Ranch development, and then goes back up. And then another one that is more traditional to our other routes, which is circular, and it would go down Broad, cut across Tank Farm, go into Avila Ranch, and then go back up Higuera. The option to go along Tank Farm between Broad and Higuera, obviously a lot more expensive. It's just a lot more miles. It would be a lot more time, and that's how our contract is organized, where we pay by the hour plus more fuel. And the consultants had noted that along Broad Street, there are generally fewer transit riders right now than there are along Higuera. So it made sense to recommend direct service along South Higuera and then into Avila Ranch. The map you see has the route going along streets that are not yet developed or connected. And so that's where the timing of putting it out in year 3, but there has been some recent information, and it was included in the agenda correspondence, that Avila Ranch seems to be moving a little bit slower through the phases. So it could be that it's a year 4, potentially year 5 thing, depending on when it is warranted, when there's a critical mass of individuals out in the Avila Ranch area. So like I said, all these service recommendations will require 6 additional vehicles be in service. Right now, we require 11 vehicles to be in service at maximum. And so we have 19 vehicles in our fleet. We kept 2 vehicles that were older in operation once we received the electric vehicles, and it's paid off in some ways because our oldest vehicles are 2007, which makes them about 18 years old at this point. Useful life is about 12 years. So we have experienced more maintenance issues with our older fleet, and keeping those instead of disposing of them has helped. But with the support to refurbish buses, which is in the capital improvement plan, we budgeted 3 refurbishments next fiscal year and then 2 the following year. And then having additional spares beyond what we normally would, we have enough buses to, with the additional EV buses that we have on order, and then refurbishing the existing ones we have enough buses to implement these service changes without the need to buy new ones. We do include the purchase of buses within the plan, just as vehicles age out. Lesson learned with keeping buses that are 18 years old, there's a lot more maintenance that has to go along with them. And it was included in the agenda correspondence, but we've been communicating since we've issued the purchase order for the 6 buses that it'll be sometime in summer. It was a 24-month build time frame. Good news, their electric bus manufacturing is moving fairly quickly, which means that the buses will be entering production as early as March 4th, which means we could get them earlier and then start the replacement process and pull some of those older buses out of service and put the EV ones into service. There are other capital investments that need to be made. Some were already part of our CIP plan. Some of them were being recommended through the draft short-range transit plan. Most notably for the new electric buses, we need charging infrastructure. We have 2 charging stations out there right now. that have a single port each for the charging stations, but we are in the process of trying to procure 6 additional dual port charging stations. So we're trying to get a little bit ahead of our bus delivery schedule. Those are going on right now, and we are developing initial plans and then submitting those to PG&E for their review, because there may need to be some what they call behind the meter upgrades to make sure that there's enough power coming to the facility to support the soon to be 10 electric buses that we'll have in our fleet. There's also bus stop improvements. We have about 45 bus stops with shelters. 12 of those are still this old style that have been around for decades. They're no longer manufactured, parts necessarily aren't available. So we're going through the process of not only replacing the old style ones, but of course maintaining and trying to install new ones. Even though we did the EV charging infrastructure improvement project at the transit yard, there's still need for maintenance. So we have a bus yard parking lot maintenance project that is pending federal grant approval, so we can move forward with that. We also have what we're calling ITS system replacement, which includes AVL, APC, and our CAD systems. That was one of the highly recommended items within the Transit Innovation Study. Again, we have some state funding, but we're seeking more federal funding for that, so pending approval. And then we have it within our CIP plan to rehab the existing downtown transit center, and then we'll talk on the next slide about a recommendation to pursue a consolidated transit center. And then lastly, which is 100% state funded and secured, is a replacement of our on-bus security camera systems. So the draft plan in the joint coordination opportunities Appendix G mentions, but it's attached to the staff report, resuming the project development of a consolidated transit center on the Higuera-Toro intersection. And this really comes from a recent purchase that the city made of 1166 Higuera, which is now operated as a public parking lot. But that was one of the big pieces that we needed to have in place in order to move forward with a consolidated transit center. This is alternative 6, I believe, from a 2012-2013 study that shows 16 bus bays, indoor-outdoor waiting area, restrooms, and then information counter that would be staffed by either contracted personnel or city staff to help passengers and people waiting for the bus. It would still take years of design and development, but it's a recommendation within the plan. It's as we update the CIP plan as part of the 2-year financial planning process, we are including placeholders in the out years for it in the event we're able to secure the additional property needed and then move forward with design and then possible construction. I already mentioned it before, but just quickly, fare and pass structures. This is what average peer agency fare is, and it was kind of amazing to see that in some we're spot on, and then actually for some, when these rates are from 2017, so they're already almost 8 years old, we're still ahead of the average. So it makes sense to kind of hold as is. Everything else seems to be going up, and it doesn't make sense with the amount of people that do pay cash fares to make them pay more. There was a question, and we responded to in the agenda correspondence about how the K-12 pilot program is doing. Seems to be doing well. It's not revolutionizing our fares by any means, but people are utilizing the 15 ride discounted fare. People, particularly students or parents of students, are also utilizing quite a bit of the one ride pass, which is great to see. So if the direction is to return on April 15th with the final plan, it seems fitting to also come with a resolution to formalize the fares and formalize the K-12 discount program for the 15 ride pass. The Downtown Access Pass program, the map shows in purple what the existing geographic boundaries are. The consultants also looked at the green area to the south and then the blue area of whether there would be an interest in expanding the Downtown Access Pass program. It seems like there is, and it seems like it can be accommodated within our $20,000 annual transfer that we get from the parking fund. There are other things that we're doing to the program, at least administratively, or I should say we have done. It used to be a quarterly renewal process. We made that annual, so now you just apply, and then a year later you have to reapply. And we also digitize the application, make it a little bit easier. We did a mailer to all downtown businesses. We plan on doing that again. And then something else that's in the innovation, excuse me, in the innovation study that wasn't analyzed in this, but we're still going to consider it, is expanding the program to residents, because residents had one of the, residents of the downtown area, because they had one of the highest transit needs index that was analyzed in, I think, working paper 3 of the Short-Range Transit Plan. And what does this all look like in interesting and engaging numbers? This is one of the excerpts from the draft plan showing the operating forecast. I try to just focus attention on the bottom line, which is the Short-Range Transit Plan elements and as they apply over the years, and then the balance of potential operating revenue that would be available. There's a lot of assumptions that are baked into it. We still have some of our ARPA operating assistance funds that are still available that we can use next fiscal year. There's our 5307 funds are available for operating and capital, but it's apportioned to our area, which means RTA has access to it as well. So it's hard to say with any with high certainty that these numbers are going to be what we actually receive, but it does look like over the 7-year planning period, where the final 2 years are what we call non-fiscally constrained, that we will have enough money available to implement and sustain these service changes. You will see that the balance starts to decrease pretty steadily every year, and so likely in those out years we'll need to start looking for new revenue streams, either whether likely state, but they could also possibly come from the federal side, or maybe start to look at reorganizing some of our routes to be a little bit more efficient. Second slide, same as the first one, but it concerns capital projects. We have a pretty well-developed CIP plan, and going through the supplemental budget, it was recently updated, so that's been incorporated into here, and you'll see that we've added lines for potential discretionary funding. Though it's not guaranteed, it's good to show that we are tying projects to certain competitive grant opportunities, with the caveat that we can always fall back on more of our formula funds if needed. But again, it shows that we're able to sustain not only what's in our CIP plan, but also capital recommendations made through the draft Short-Range Transit Plan. And I did want to talk a little bit just generally about what I'm hearing from not only other agencies, but also consultants about the future state of federal transit funds. Yesterday, I attended a virtual webinar about sort of navigating through the new administration's requirements and what they'll be focusing on. And overall, I would say it's hopeful, and it leans toward positivity more than negativity when it comes to the long-term outcome. But the number one and top piece of advice I've gotten from everybody is just keep doing what you're doing, keep applying, when you get awarded, keep submitting for reimbursement, because so far and as of end of January, money is still coming in, so that's all positive. It just may take a little bit longer. There's been some layoffs that have hit the Department of Transportation, and there's also another layer of top-end oversight that is probably going to slow down not only the application review, but also the reimbursement process. And there were some initial concerns when the White House said that they were going to suspend all grant and aid disbursements. That's been challenged in court. At least it was held by a federal judge for a period of time, but I was reassured yesterday that the executive branch, at least legally, does not have the authority to do that, and money that has already been apportioned by Congress will continue to flow to state and local agencies. And then through the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, which is in the fourth year of its 5-year term, included a lot of competitive grants. If it is renewed or re-envisioned in another way, it will likely not include as many competitive grants, which may be a positive for us. It may mean that there's just going to be more money apportioned to our area, and then we would apply locally to have it allocated. And that transportation has always been and will hopefully continue to be a bipartisan topic. There just seems like there's going to be a different focus. It's not going to be as much focus on climate change and reducing carbon emissions. Is going to be more focus on safety, new technologies, and then how your services, either expanded or existing, are benefiting families. On January 8th, the Mass Transportation Committee recommended inclusion of certain service, fare, and pass program recommendations with 2 adjustments. There was in November an announcement made by Cal Poly that they would move to the semester system in fiscal year 26-27, but not start what they're calling their year-round operation until 28-29. So the MTC's recommendation was to slightly modify the service change recommendations to follow more of what Cal Poly is doing with their calendar schedule. Next steps, we're here, February 25th. If direction is given, we will work with the consultants, incorporate all the final changes, package the plan back up, return as hopefully a consent item on April 15th, move to adopt, and then also move to adopt new rates that formalize the K-12 Pass program, and then these will the financial plan elements of the draft plan, or the final plan at that point, will be incorporated into the 2-year financial planning process. So once again, the recommendations are to receive and provide feedback on the administrative draft of Slow Transit Short-Range Transit Plan, and to direct staff to make any necessary changes and return with a final plan for adoption on April 15th.
Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of information to get through and a lot of updates. And before we go any further, we're going to take about a 5-ish minute break, and we'll see you back in a few moments. Well, thank you for the quick break. And truly, as I was saying, as we left for the break, really appreciate, Alex, all of the information you shared, all of the extra feedback you gathered from the community, and re-looking at this. I think even just the staggering of buses, so that there is a actual reality of more frequency, but yet the 90-minute loop is still the 90-minute loop. I mean, those are just creative and innovative ways to try to help serve our community. So thank you for that. Any questions, Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I wondered if you could scroll back a couple of slides. I think I was looking at my notes when you, one more, the second chart there, that one, yeah. Can you just kind of repeat what you were saying about this one?
Sure. I was saying that this table includes what's currently within our CIP plan, capital investments that would need to be made to fully implement the service recommendations of the draft plan. And then for certain projects, we do have offsetting discretionary grant funds that we plan to pursue. If we don't receive those for whatever reason, then we would likely fall back on our formula funds, the 5307 funds available to us.
Okay, and so is that why in like the pretty far out years, 30 through 32, you're just not sure what other funding opportunities there would be then, so the costs are higher?
Yeah, there's, I mean, is there a specific line that?
Oh, just noticing that the bottom line is higher in the last 2 columns.
Oh, so that's sort of a rolling balance. The way that the consultants have done the draft plan is different than the way we do our financial planning process. Is they've separated out capital from operating. So it just shows that what we've apportioned to capital expenses, we would over the 7-year planning period accrue a balance. But again, that's money that we could, if we realized it, we could use for operating if it was flexible funds, or put it toward other projects throughout that planning period.
Oh, so these are revenues, not expenditures?
They're both.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry, I apologize.
Okay. Then I guess as I was reading, there's a lot of options, right? The report is full of lots of different options. And option that I think the difference in what's proposed in the various options for serving Avila Ranch, if I'm understanding correctly, there's option 1A, which is basically expanding the 2A route to add some different portions that float through Avila Ranch. Or there's the other option of separating out service to Avila Ranch through a longer route that way. Yes, thank you for scrolling between those two slides. It seems like it's hard for me to understand how adding a new route would be more cost effective in the long run than just adding more frequency and expanding the existing route a little bit. So option 1A seems like, until there's a lot more maybe development on Broad and Tank Farm and creates the need for more stops, that this option is more logistically and economically a better way to go. Would you say that?
The reason the draft plan recommends a new route is we're Route 2A has about a 40% on-time performance, which means we're 6 minutes or more late on 60% of our trips. And then Route 2B, it's about 50%. So even if we add time, add a little bit of length to go through Froome Ranch, there's not that confidence that we would be able to then go through Avila Ranch as well and stay on time with even a 90-minute cycle. So there's also other areas like the Cayo Joaquin that would naturally or likely be served by Route 2. And there's in some ways only so far we can stretch this route before we would start needing more. And that's why the recommendation is to just move forward with a new direct route, see how this one operates, and this one, how the revision to Route 2A and 2B would operate. And then if there is a need for service to Cayo Joaquin, be able to expand it without jeopardizing the on-time performance.
Okay.
But you're right, it would be easier to package it all into one route, but it would definitely overburden this route, and it would make it, we might be back where we were before with very poor on-time performance.
So it's not a problem that can be solved with just adding more buses to the route, is what I think you're saying, because the route still is having on-time performance issues, and that doesn't get fixed by adding more buses doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be if, we took those resources for the new route and then applied it to this. I mean, in theory, it would be a 15-minute, frequency, but if it's running behind continually and buses are starting to stack up, people are going to lose confidence in the service.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is about charging at the bus depot, whatever you want to call it. So we have 2 chargers already, and we have 2 EV buses in service right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how much more capacity do we anticipate needing, and how do we balance that? I don't know how long does it take to charge an electric bus? How are we figuring out how to balance that with the new fleet that we're getting, and how many chargers we have, and making sure there's enough time to charge all the buses at night if we're going to be using a lot more buses? How are you thinking about all that and making sure that we're doing everything at the right way?
There's a lot of math that goes into it, especially with the charges we have a different draw rate than the charges we're trying to procure now. And going from a single port to a dual port changes the math a little bit on it. But we were in conversations with ChargePoint, which is the charging station manufacturer, the ones we have now. And with the battery pack size of the vehicles that are on order, they were estimating that with the newer, faster dual port charging stations, we could probably go from about 20% battery capacity to 100 in about 4 hours if a charging station was dedicated to one. And then if you had two hooked up, it would be 6 to 8, depending on if they charge concurrently or if one charges, and then once it's at 100% capacity, the second one starts to charge. But so far with the two EV buses that we have that have smaller battery packs, it's a 4-pack instead of a 6-pack that is on the new buses. We're seeing the buses return with about 33 to 36% battery life. So the hope is that when we get these new buses, they put in a service that they're not coming back with the 20% battery capacity, they're coming back with more. But luckily ChargePoint and other third-party companies offer management software to help track this, to make sure that when buses are coming in, they're charging based on the priority of how low their battery is and or when they're going to be put back out into service the next day. But there will be a little bit of trial and error, to be completely honest. The infrastructure project that we did it is ready for 12 dual port charging stations. So we will at some point have 24 fully electric buses out there. And then we'll have the capacity on the behind the meter side to pull that much power. And it'll almost exclusively be at night. We're not planning, at least right now, to pull buses from service and do what they call like opportunity or midday charging. It'll be pretty much from 10 to 11 p.m. to 5 to 6 a.m.
That's awesome. So it sounds like, what I've heard from some of the other discussions around some of our regional transit providers is they're not sure if if electric buses are going to work for them because of the distances they have to drive and whether or not they can use a bus for an entire day and have battery left at the end of the day. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that at least for the city of SLO, that's not an issue. They're, at least in our current situation, they're able to drive around town all day and just charge at night and not have to be taken out of service in the middle of the day.
Yeah, we're lucky with a local bus service that we have that the distances are relatively low. It's all street miles, so we're benefiting from that regenerative braking. We're not doing long highway miles like some other agencies. Because I have heard where if they are traveling long distances or more regional service, they're buying 1.5 electric buses to every fossil fuel bus that they're replacing. And at least as of right now, we're not in that position. And Gillig, the manufacturer of the buses we have on order, does make a bus with an even larger battery pack. And of course, technology is continually improving. So there is likely in the near future that we would have a bus that's the same weight, but could go longer, better regenerative braking, less battery degradation, and it would be even a better use for our community.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, just a few questions for now. I sent a lot in advance that are in the agenda correspondence, so thank you for answering those. The first question I had asked, I want some additional clarification on. This was in reference to the $90,000 of the transit fund that we allocate annually for bus stop improvements. The answer is helpful in understanding why that number, what that number does for us. It says it's approximately 3 bus shelters and related amenities. But the other thing I was curious about is why 90,000? Why not 120,000? Then we can do 4 bus shelters a year. So how did we arrive at this either the dollar amount or the goal of, I guess, 3 shelters a year?
I don't mean to push the blame or answer onto past managers, but it was something that I would adopted when I took over this position. But for a while, there was with certain projects where we'd accumulate enough money to do one, big swoop, one big project as opposed to multiple little projects over the years. And right now, we're actually working on a grant to replace 6 old shelters, which is budget-wise is coming to about $350,000. And so we are doing that where we're using that 90,000, but we're trying to do more and then reallocate additional funds. But it likely will change as we in the transit innovation study recommend updating our bus stop inventory, and then start to look at areas either through the short range transit plan or separately that are primed for more amenities aside from shelters, like real-time passenger information and solar lighting. So it's not changing right now, but there's a likelihood that that number will change as we adopt newer technologies and get a better handle on the amenities that our community needs.
Thanks. My next question is, either in the past when we've been doing the background information or going forward, do we look at, what percentage of the population is within a quarter mile of the route and how these different routing decisions affect that number ultimately?
Are you talking in reference to, I think there's a performance standard that says that 90% of the population will be within a certain distance?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't recall if we mapped it as part of the short range transit plan update, but we did map other services like medical and affordable housing, and all but one that is currently within the city limits is within a quarter mile of our existing routes. And then, we'll provide greater coverage through the service recommendations. But no, that is something that we can work with our GIS team to do outside of the short range transit plan. But I don't recall if it was done through this effort.
Yeah, I think it might be a valuable thing to generally keep track of. I mean, especially if we do kind of have a goal towards hitting a certain target. Yeah, okay. And then my last question is, how locked in on the specifics of the route are we in the short range transit plan? If we adopt a plan, we implement a new route, 6 months in, we realize, going down this street is problematic for whatever reason, and we want to, we want to make adjustments. How much flexibility is there?
A lot, frankly. I mean, this is not supposed to be a prescriptive plan. We're always considering realignments. How can we better navigate, either temporarily through construction detours or permanently as we try to just fine tune our routes. I provide the example of we go along Ramona, which is just off of Foothill, and we're going through the process of trying to pull that back on the Foothill because it adds time. And now with the pedestrian access from Ramona to Foothill, there's a way mid-block for people to get through there. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility still left in here. And the plan moving forward, whatever service recommendations are made into the final plan will be followed by outreach to make sure that it meets the specific needs of the people that are along that route.
Is there like a 6-month or 1-year evaluation, or is it sort of ongoing? You're kind of continually evaluating. How do you decide whether there might be a need to adjust a route based on what we've learned? Particularly with the idea of proposing a very new route. It'd be interesting. I'm very curious to see how it will perform. But so how are we going to monitor that? And would you come back to council if it was a significant change, or how does that?
So we're always receiving feedback. There's no set timeline on after a certain period of time. We will definitely hear it from the public if it's impacting them, and we'll hear it from our drivers as well because they're one of the most reliable sources of information. They're out there every day. So yeah, we can do a 6-month or annual look back, but really we're open to receiving information on realignments or how to make micro improvements to the routes all the time. When it comes to whether there's significant changes or there's a proposal, happy to come back and present maybe 1 or 2 alternatives for council's consideration so that there's no surprises and that the update or the revision of the route is being vetted. Because right now the We have a policy for major service changes, and it's really anything that affects, I think it's more than 15% of the stops, or there's a fixed number as well. So, which really, when you have 160 bus stops that you service, can be 4 on a route or 5. It's not necessarily as significant as establishing a new route or revising it as some of these changes. So yeah, happy to come back and discuss it further.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that question because that was one of mine as far as the kind of the evaluation. As you know, I'm a big fan of the pilot program ideas in lots of realms. I think that it's good to try things out and see what works and what doesn't work so that we can get to a place where we're really creating something that we feel good about and the community feels good about. So I think as far as the evaluations, I don't always know that the community knows that they can put in their input, especially with something like mass transportation, where I feel like, or mass transit, sorry, where people feel like this is what I have no choice. So I think if there's not already, which you probably already have this, but just including more of on each bus, on the inside of the bus, hey, have an improvement, email here or put a comment here on the suggestion card or whatever that is. Is there already something like that that exists on every single bus?
There is, but we can always add more. And one thing that we've been talking about with our communications coordinator is to establish a mailing list, because a lot of people are, hey, I want to hear periodically. And so we're either going to try to collect emails, or as like I found out through the public school system, they're happy to text you with information. And so if people will feel more comfortable getting it that way. So yeah, we want to try to foster that two-way communication, and it may mean also doing more like onboard surveys outside of a short-range transit plan process so that we're collecting continual feedback.
Perfect, thank you. I think just specifically on this, I think this will be helpful to kind of remind people that they always can put feedback, but we're specifically trying something new, so what do you think? I think that's helpful. And I also appreciated in the report around, reaching out to the schools in different ways, because the most comments that I've received, grocery store, wherever I was really that I don't use my phone. I don't have that kind of access, and really hearing how the not so digital communication would really be helpful for public transit. The other thing, I had a question on page 238, the number 7 in the correspondence with the targeted outreach. It said that the responses received by staff from these efforts included ... Was this only staff that was connected then with the CAPSLO, People Self-Help Housing, HASLO, Department of Public Health, or was it actual individuals that received the services from these different organizations?
So we got in contact with some of the community organization representatives, and we said, give us your input on it. Some of them had direct relationships with clients. Other ones brought it to boards that were either internal boards or boards from other representative agencies. And we provided like a 5-slide presentation that was not only had the what's a short-range transit plan, but also the service change recommendations, and then some prompting questions on what more we can get back. And then we also did some one-on-one interviews if they wanted to sit down and talk a little bit through it. I think it was People Self-Help Housing. I joined one of their, I think it was either monthly or quarterly meetings with, it was purely staff, but one thing that we suggested to all of them and said we're happy to do is if there are properties that they manage that are along some of the routes that we service, coming and doing on-site training. Happy to sit down with people, do some service planning. If there's any informational materials that we can drop off there, and then continue to refresh as new ones come out. Most of them, actually everybody was receptive to that, and so now it's just starting the process of mapping where they are and then starting to schedule those on-site trainings. But that is sort of the next phase of this ongoing engagement.
That's great. Thank you so much. My computer decided to turn off, so that's all the questions I have at this time. Any public comment?
Yes, we have 3. At this time, Rachel Whelan, Louise Justice, and, I can't remember, Annie Seacrest.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Rachel Whalen, the Governmental Affairs Coordinator at the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to convey the SLO Chamber's support for the city's short-range transit plan. I want to start by thanking Matt Horn, Jennifer Rice, Alex Fuchs, and their team for all their hard work that has gone into this plan. The SLO Chamber sees the short-range transit plan as a critical step in shaping a more connected, accessible, and sustainable future for our community. This plan is more than just a transportation strategy. It serves as the foundation for future development and economic vitality. We commend the city for its commitment to improving transit efficiency, particularly for the work that has gone into reducing the headway times on routes 2A and 2B from 90 minutes to 45 minutes. Increasing frequency is essential to making transit a more viable and convenient option for residents, employees, and visitors. As the city continues refining its transit strategy, we encourage further exploration of ways to reduce wait times even more to enhance ridership and accessibility. As the city plans for the future, we recommend considering the development of a major transit stop that aligns with the state definition of serving 2 or more major bus routes with service intervals of 15 minutes or less during peak commute hours. Such a stop would be a catalyst for smart growth, fostering increased density, mixed-use development, and a more walkable, transit-oriented community. Strategically, locating this hub could unlock the support and development of employment centers, housing, and commercial districts, ensuring that transit remains a cornerstone of SLO's mobility network. If the consolidated transit study site at Higuera and Toro Street, as referenced in this report, aligns with the major transit stop state definition, the SLO Chamber could be in support of its development in the future. Additionally, we appreciate the city's ongoing collaboration efforts and encourage continued focus on evaluating how the transit plan interacts with other city programs. Collaboration across departments further ensures that transportation aligns seamlessly with housing, economic development, and sustainability initiatives. By building on these interdepartmental partnerships, the city can maximize the benefits of this plan and create a well-integrated, future-ready San Luis Obispo. We look forward to a continued partnership with the city to advance this vision and ensure that our transit system supports a thriving, resilient community. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Louise Justice.
Good evening. I'm Louise Justice, a resident of San Luis Obispo. I've been here before, and I would like, first of all, to thank Alex because he made a very good presentation. I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that our fares are not going to be increased and that you do not support the realignment of routes 1 and 3. I took 1B in this evening. I sat next to a young man who had been on the bus and went all the way out to the airport, and when he gets to the transit center this evening, he has to wait a half hour for the 2A. By the time he gets home in the Ocean Air area, he will be on the bus for almost 2 hours. And I think that's the problem. I've addressed this scheduling situation before, and I would like to emphasize it once again. We need better scheduling in our bus routes. I also think that the fact that we have to wait till 2026 and 27 to get the B routes operating on the weekends is unfortunate. And while we wait for those 6 new buses, I would like to see a little bit more housekeeping maintenance on the older buses, especially the 18-year-old ones. We do need a little more communication, and I know that Mr. Stanley does a very nice job. However, he needs to have an update on the rider alerts that are posted at the bus stops. And also with regard to changing the schedules, he needs to make sure that they are sufficiently provided on each bus. I do want to thank you for listening to me, but please consider rescheduling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Annie Seacrest, and then our final speaker is Aaron Pasternak.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. My name is Annie Seacrest, and I am a resident, but that's not the capacity I'm here for tonight. I am the Sustainability Manager for the County of San Luis Department of Airports. The County of San Luis Department of Airports is committed to demonstrating our pledged goals of reducing our carbon footprint by 30% by 2033. We are currently embarking on a sustainability and decarbonization plan to identify implementable roadmaps towards that commitment. As the entry and exit point for over 750,000 passengers a year, we have a unique opportunity to showcase our region's commitment to environmental stewardship through providing a robust alternative transportation program. As part of our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint, we are exploring ways to expand alternative transportation to and from the airport, including ways that do not currently exist, such as the concept of creating a microtransit option. Our ongoing Wi-Fi survey of passengers routinely highlights a gap in reliable alternative transportation service during the nighttime hours when the bus pickups have ceased and rideshare opportunities are scarce. A microtransit opportunity may provide our customers with an option when one currently does not exist. Airports have had discussions with city staff about exploring a low or zero emission microtransit concept that reaches the airport during the nighttime hours. With our shared interest in promoting economic vitality of the region while demonstrating environmental stewardship, the county's Department of Airports would like to underscore our commitment to fleshing this concept out further with the city. We look forward to exploring opportunities for alternative transportation growth and innovation that will ensure passenger, employee, and community safety and vitality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Hello, City Council, Madam Mayor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would also like to thank Jennifer Rice and Alex Fuchs for giving such a detailed presentation about the different service changes and service increases that will be happening to slow transit within the next few years. I have a couple of things I'd like to give feedback about. First of all, I believe that the service increases on the 4A and 4B could be further improved to, say, at least every 30-minute service instead of just doing 2 extra trips in the morning and then 2 extra trips in the afternoon. And I would also like to say that getting the B routes running on the weekends as soon as possible would be really, really good, especially considering that a lot of students and community members in general tend to use that in order to get to the shopping malls in the southwest part of the city to get the groceries, as right now it's very, very difficult. So I just would like to put that out there. I also believe that that reinstating the Highland Tripper, as well as a couple of other Tripper routes in order to help deal with the crowds, the crowding on the 3A, on the 3AB and 4AB routes during the morning and afternoon peaks is also a really, really great addition. I'd like to commend that effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's the end?
That's our final speaker.
Okay, thank you. I would love if you could share again a little bit more about the weekends. I understand the connecting of Cal Poly. I also understand that people who work on the weekends can't use the bus, so it they can, but it's not enough hours. And back to pilots, it's kind of the gateway. When you have a little more flexibility in your schedule, if you're working on the weekdays, you could try it out on the weekends and see if this works for you. But trying it out for the first time when it could take an hour, it could take 2 hours when you're used to driving 15 minutes, it makes it difficult to try. So it might be helpful to understand a little bit more about the weekends beyond Cal Poly on the money budget.
Sorry, you said on the financial side of it? All right, I do have a slide I'm going to go to that has a little bit more detail about operating costs for each of these service plan elements. This actually says, this is actually wrong, but it's okay.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, no worries. So as it's projected right now, adding B service on the weekends between 7:45 a.m. and 8 p.m. Is projected to cost about $424,000 annually, and then there's always some annual inflator built on top of that. But in the sense of timing and greatest benefit, I don't think there's really a absolutely correct answer. The initial feedback we got at the July study session was do it in advance. We don't have to follow Cal Poly's changes. And so that's why one of the recommendations was to start it a little bit earlier. And it remains that recommendation, even though Cal Poly will likely move to a year-round system several years later, because even through the unmet transit needs assessment, onboard surveys, and our Open City Hall community surveys, we've heard that that is one of the biggest asks out there, is how to get more frequent service on the weekends.
Thank you. I appreciate you just expanding on that a little bit. I think Vice Mayor Shoresman.
Thanks. Yeah, I was hoping you could, there was one more slide I think that you had that talked about the changes that the Mass Transit Committee recommended to adjust from what you had originally recommended. And so if I'm understanding correctly, they were suggesting to modify the academic service to align with Cal Poly's transition to semester system, not to year-round. Maybe you could just talk about the differences again a little bit between what was the original recommendation and what the Mass Transit Committee wanted.
So at the January 8th Mass Transportation Committee meeting, we presented what we were calling the time preliminary service recommendations of the draft plan. And Marlene Kramer, who is the Director of Transportation and Parking Services at Cal Poly, informed the group that in November, which was after the working papers were produced, that Cal Poly had said that, yes, we are moving to a semester system, we're moving to a year-round system, but they're not going to happen on the same year. And so there's a discussion amongst committee members of should they change the recommendation, ultimately decided to recommend that we modify academic to follow the semester system in 26-27, and then when Cal Poly is prepared to move to what they're calling year-round operation, that's when we would go full academic year-round, and that would be in 28-29.
So they're actually going year-round 27-28. So this would be going year-round. This would be aligning our service with their year-round schedule a year late, I believe. Am I thinking about the timing correctly?
Right, that's what I was questioning as well, because Cal Poly in fall of 26 goes to semester, so that means summer of 27 is officially the first year round, right? But then here on 28-29, it's saying align with year round. So that was where the confusion was for me too.
I apologize, and this might have been something that I got lost in translation during the MTC meeting, but the understanding was, in my mind at least, that Cal Poly would begin fall of 28, and then they would continue on through year-round beginning in summer of 29.
I think it has been a little confusing. It has changed over time a little bit. I think they were originally projecting it to start sooner than it is. They were originally planning, I think, to have the semester system start sooner than it is too, but they've pushed that back. So my understanding, and I guess we have a resident expert here, but my understanding is that their year-round is actually would align with 27, 28, and maybe Mr. Boswell wants to.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check in a second, but yes, the year-round operations got pushed. It's definitely not occurring simultaneous with the shift to semesters. Semesters is set, that's happening fall 26, but year-round's been pushed. I think this is correct.
I think it's August 27, or August 27, according to Courtney. But like I said, that has moved and changed. But that might be something that we want to discuss as we prioritize these things. Excuse me, my voice is, I'm going to try and talk less so that I keep it for my comments. But I just wanted to start out, thank you for answering that last question. Thank you also for the very thorough report. This is one of those plans where I think when we looked at it last time, I was probably one of the people that was like, I want it all. I can't choose, so I just want it all. Because as we've heard from our community, it's not going to be soon enough, no matter what we do. But I realize that, there's capacity issues and we can't do everything all at once. And when we do everything all at once, sometimes we don't do it very well either. So we want to make sure that we roll out these changes smart and thoughtfully, and that we do as good a job as we can doing them also. We hear over and over again that frequency of service, we heard it again tonight, is the key priority. Weekends is also a priority, but mostly frequency. When people stop me on the street or talk to me in passing about why they don't ride the bus, it's because they'd have to wait long durations for the bus to come, or they'd have to wait a long time when they want to go home. And so those two things are the most important. So whatever we can do, whether it's adding more buses or changing routes to accommodate a new route. I know there's budget trade-offs that we have to balance as well, but that's why I guess I was asking about the 1A option. Is I want to try to, as much as we can, strike a balance between the cost and providing a higher level of service. So I'm content with the recommendation about that staff has come up with about increasing the frequency and serving San Luis Ranch and maybe tackling Avila Ranch in a different route. I am concerned a little bit about the timing of the Avila Ranch development access, because we've got a few hundred units that are going to be active by the end of 26, 27. Thank you for answering that question in the agenda correspondence. And I know that it's really important to start habits early. And if we've got 300 units full of people that are going to get used to driving their cars, when they may have taken another option if it had been available to them, then I just want us to think thoughtfully about that and maybe consider moving that priority up. In the list here, I might propose swapping that bullet point to 26, 27, and then swapping the year-round academic service to 27, 28. But I'd love to hear what my colleagues think about that, and if that's even an option. I guess I would ask staff that as well. The other, I'll come back to that in a second. The other thing I want to just make a point about is that I'm so happy that the low-cost bus passes for kids are working out really well, and I think that the one ride option I can see as a parent, if when I had a kid at Laguna and I wasn't going to be able to get my kid, pick up my kid after school, that I could just tell them, use your 75 cents that I gave you and get on the bus today. So I'm really, really glad to see that that's being taken advantage of, and it seems like something that staff is comfortable moving forward with a recommendation to continue. And then also just want to put another plug in for micromobility and appreciate our friends from the airport here to put a plug in for that as well. And I know recently I was stuck at the airport on a Friday night at about midnight, and an Uber would not come and get me. They kept canceling my requests because they had better, cheaper, better, more economical options available to them, probably picking people up from downtown. So I'm very interested and glad that our friends at the airport want to partner with us on something like that. And with that, I guess I'll just close with my question about our ability to kind of move priorities around in this list. How tied are we to the list based on cost or other factors?
I mean, as presented in the draft plan and as forecasted, they're all sustainable, even if they're accelerated slightly. It puts a lot of pressure to do a lot in the next 2 years, but that's from the study session was the understanding of the expectation. So it's something that we can put in there and strive for. And if there is a further delay in development, always delay the implementation of the what they're called Route 5, the direct service to Avila Ranch. But yeah, that's why we're having this opportunity, because none of these are fixed, and we can move them around as council sees fit.
Okay, well then I guess I would throw that into the pot here for discussion as far as the prioritization of things, and wondering if my colleagues think that it would be a reasonable thing. I realize there would be drawbacks maybe to it also, but to rolling out the academic service in 26 versus 27 and swapping it for Avila.
I'm also going to add in city manager to the conversation.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, I pulled up a Mustang News article to try to help confirm, and I'm reaching out as well to Cal Poly to kind of extra confirm. What it reports is what is reflected up on the screen, which is that they're looking to make the transition to semesters and have that in place for 2 years, academic years, and then go to year-round operations in 28-29. So that's the clarification. And I know I've heard different dates as well, and so I had to do some quick research too.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. Councilmember Boswell, did you want to tie into Vice Mayor's question, or did you want to put in your comments first?
Yeah, I had another question and then some comments. Yeah. The first question, something that came up from public comment, and it had been something I was curious about a little bit as well. There are certainly right now some routes where making connections is not ideal when you're trying to go crosstown. And I know in the proposal, it would potentially include some new 45-minute routes, and I assume those are the ones that are trouble. If you have I'm thinking out loud here, so correct me, but if everything's a 60-minute route, then everything can be timed to arrive kind of into the station at the same time and depart around the same time. So is it the 45-minute routes that are the problem, or what is the problem with routes that don't line up well for making crosstown connections?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is we have a combination of 45-minute, 60-minute routes. Some of them arrive more frequently, like the Route 3A at peak is going every 20 minutes. And so plus it's whether you're trying to go from an A to a B, so there's a combination of factors. But with some of the recommendations, there would be more frequent 4A, 4B service, more frequent 2A, 2B service. If the new route is moved up, there'd be more service along South Higuera going to downtown as a connecting point. But there are so that would hopefully close some of those transfer gaps that we're seeing. And same with weekend service. That's something we heard a lot, is if I'm only relying on the A routes, it can be an hour and a half or 2 hours just to go one way. But something we've been talking about at the staff level is, are there places where there's overlapping routes that we can start to highlight or improve as transfer points outside of the downtown, because all the routes do kind of separate to some extent. And so Promenade is a good example of, we have routes 2A, 2B, and 3A, 3B that go along there. And so that is something that we can call out and say, hey, if you are trying to make a transfer and you might not have thought about it, this is a great place to do it.
Yeah. So there's a sense that under the new plan, we'd be able to do better on the connections than what we're doing currently.
Yes.
It'll give us more flexibility to increase some route connections.
Yes, and there is going to be an opportunity to adjust it as Cal Poly element, as they move away from poly time. There is going to be an opportunity to look at all the schedules, yeah.
Okay, one comment I'll make too is on the year-round operations. I mean, this is Cal Poly's, current best assessment as to when they would move to year-round operations, but we shouldn't put too much stake in it. It's moved, I think, 3 times in about 3 or 4 years. So we can do our best planning, but we should keep in mind we might want to be ready to be flexible on that issue as well. I think I would echo a lot of the comments of Vice Mayor Shorsman. I'm generally supportive of what we're seeing here on the recommendations, including the Mass Transportation Committee changes, which, by the way, big thank you to the Mass Transportation Committee for doing a lot of the heavy lifting to bring a very well thought out plan to us on the council. But I'm open to some moving things up if that's of interest. I'm not sure what all you wanted us to comment on. I had a few things though, supportive of the proposed fare structure, including, I guess, continuing the K through 12 program is now just a program, not a pilot program. I'm very excited to see that's working well. Moving forward with the transit center as well is another one I support. And I wasn't sure if there was anything else you wanted input on beyond the routing and timing issues, the fares, and the transit center. Was there any additional area you were looking for feedback?
No, that's, I mean, that encapsulates the recommendations of the draft plan. And so that's what we wanted to gain feedback on, with the understanding that, the world will change around us, 1, and 2, there's going to be opportunities through this financial planning period to continue to make changes and improvements. And this isn't going to be the only opportunity that the public or you all have to improve our services.
Thank you. I can, I'll stop there.
Thank you. I think going back to one of the comments that we've heard today from one of our public commenters, but also from other times around the when you get to the bus stop and the time has changed and you don't know. So I'm wondering, with the budget and the funding we're talking about to be able to make all of these different changes happen, could there be additional funding to make sure that we're having the right outreach at the bus stops themselves, or more time to provide additional staff to be able to update a phone number, a phone tree situation, I don't know, the voice over internet, whatever that looks like, but so that people who know for sure show up here at this time, give or take 5 minutes, of course. That concerns me a little bit around how do people know if something has changed.
I might kick myself for saying this, but I feel like it's staffing resource-wise, we're there now with the support of the communications coordinator, and we have a half-time administrative assistant that we're still onboarding, but that's going to be helping push information out there.
Including the weekends.
Well, we do rely on our dispatch team that's contracted to answer those weekend calls. But normally the daily issues where we're having to either detour or temporary close stops, we're learning about it the same day, and within an hour we're getting information out either through the app, the website, social media, also informing our our contractors so that they can talk to people on and off the bus. It does take a little bit longer to get actual physical print materials to those bus stops. So one thing that we tried doing, and we're still doing right now for the construction of the new parking structure, is we just did an extended detour. We said instead of trying to figure out what's happening on a day-to-day basis, is there a partial closure or a full closure, is there going to be a delay, we're just detouring entirely. And so that might be something dependent on the size of construction projects throughout the city we do more often. But I also think with the funding we have approved for AVL and APC replacements, that will also mean more reliable or new transit app entirely. We can push information through there. We're working with our token transit app provider to be able to push information through there. I know most of these are digital in that sense, but if we have reliable AVL information, we can have more reliable real-time passenger information at the bus stops. And so the only reason I wouldn't ask for money right now for that is I'm not quite sure of what that number would be and where we would deploy those. First, I want to get this AVL system fully functional and then look beyond that to where we can start to has the highest need to deploy that information.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I also, yes, when we come back in April, the K through 12, just kind of solidifying that program, I think that makes perfect sense. And I agree, Vice Mayor, the one-way is a perfect addition. And I know it's not for today, but I know that we'll be updating the payments soon, right? If you're paying with your phone or something, that's coming pretty soon, right? The change.
Yeah, so I'm working with SlowCog and RTA on what we're calling an open loop payment system project. It's sponsored by the state, and through that you would be able to tap your card. So it'd be contactless payment. It would accept credit cards on the buses that we don't do right now, and it would have this thing called fare capping, where if you ride frequently but you can't afford a monthly pass, well, once you got to that limit of $40, you wouldn't be charged anymore for the remainder of that month. There's also some discount eligibility verification capabilities through there for persons with disabilities. I believe the state is working on for veterans as well, and then they're trying to figure out for students, for K through 12 students. So there's a lot of benefits to it. We're close, likely, spoiler alert, you'll see something on the agenda for contracts and amendment to our cooperative agreement with SlowCog because they are paying for it.
Great, thank you so much. I know that as we talk about having the more solidified program, the communication, the TAP, we're really making it easier and easier to be able to utilize the bus, which is our whole goal. So thank you for that. I also am very thankful. So many people were shocked when I said, no, I promise you, when I looked at the study, there's no fare increase asked for right now, and people were so thankful. So that is wonderful. When we purchased the property on Higuera for the transit center, well, not for the transit center at that moment, but we definitely were keeping that in mind of, can we look at the transit center? And so I'm very much in favor of that. The only thing I would say, when you mentioned detours earlier, that did make me think about how people access the bus when it's on detour. Sometimes just thinking about, is a senior or someone with differing abilities or a stroller or et cetera having to go much, much further now because of the detour, just trying to think about what that looks like. Knowing that we have so much construction planned over the next while, that I just think about that on an often basis when I see the detours come through. I think I have approached everything except for Vice Mayor, your comment. And I'm open to the new direct route to Avila Ranch coming earlier. I hear you on starting a habit is definitely easier if you start it right away than later. At the same time, I want to be cognizant of frequency is the focus, and if that affects that at all, that would be not as much my interest. But I think that you have a really good alignment here, and I appreciate Councilmember Boswell. Yes, the academic year-round and the everything has changed quite often with Cal Poly. So finding that constant flexibility to work with them as well is important. I think that is all the comments. I'll move on to Vice Mayor.
Thank you, yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Boswell, for that perspective of that it has the Cal Poly's plans have changed a few times. So I guess, you know, I'm totally fine with the way that it's proposed here. I think, you know, as I mentioned, that I'm concerned about the folks in Avila Ranch having to walk half a mile at least in order to get to the closest bus stop. So if it seems to be that changes with Cal Poly get pushed off longer, or there's an opportunity to bump up the Avila route a little bit sooner, I just would encourage us to try and do that.
Thank you. City Manager?
Thank you. So I think there's not total clarity on the issue of when year-round is expected to start. At least that's what I'm getting at the moment. And so we are proposing to take this feedback, finalize the plan, and bring it back for adoption. If something changes and what we hear back from Cal Poly, we could update the plan from there. And then, of course, I think, you know, again, account for if something changes again in the future. So I guess that would be my recommendation at this point on that question.
Thank you. Flexibility is key.
Yes.
And I also forgot to mention, I just thank you so much for mentioning from the county. You know, when you go other locations throughout the U.S. and beyond, and you get off the airplane, you can look up, can I get somewhere on a bus quickly? And from Amtrak, people really love coming. They're like, oh, wow, I can get off here, I can get on the bus, I can go downtown. They love that. From the airport, it's a little more tricky, so I'm thrilled that we'll be working with our regional partners as much. So Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing for us to think about, and it's not exactly within the purview of the short-range transit plan, but it's highly related. So we need to keep it in mind. And it's a little bit personal anecdote, because for about a decade, I was a weekly bus rider. Luckily, going to Cal Poly, I lived on Route 3, so it was very easy to hop on the bus, and I could go either direction to Cal Poly, and I didn't have to change buses. When I moved 5 or 6 years ago, I got to where I had to change buses, and the connections didn't match. And of course, if one's late, then you're missing the connection, so it became very infeasible to take the bus on a regular basis. But the other issue that I ran into was bus stop accessibility. And so I think this is something we have to pay a little more close attention to in a number of cases. And in my case, I have to cross Broad Street in the morning to get to a bus stop, and that's not easy to do. It's either a long, very long walk to go around to a signalized intersection to come around to the bus stop, or I have to dash across the street, which is, kids don't do that. It is not safe on Broad Street, but there's areas on Madonna that are like this. And in some of our other major streets where it's difficult to cross the street within a reasonable walking distance to get access to the bus stop. So we've got to make sure that we're paying attention to our bus stop locations when we're thinking about cross-street access. And of course, we've got work to do in other aspects of our capital programs and our other transportation plans to make these streets more pedestrian friendly. That pedestrian access and transit are very closely linked. Thank you.
Very much agree, and I believe we'll be looking at in April where that Broad Street plan project fits into the budget, which would be hopefully helping people get across the street in a better way. So I think we've answered all the questions for a study session at this point. Anything else you have for us?
The only thing I would say in response to Councilmember Boswell's immediate comment is it's good timing, because we had another Cal Poly professor that reached out about relocating a bus stop on Broad Street. It's on the east side, but closer to one of the designated pedestrian crossings. And it's also something that was discussed at an MTC meeting, because there's full support amongst that committee to start to co-locate. And so, you know, with internally, we're going to continue to look at that as these street improvements occur, is can we move a bus stop a block here, a block there, and make it easier to access? So absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you. Oops.
Yeah, and it's thanks for looking into that. South Street's another example, and it occurs to me, you know, we've in the last several years put in a lot of new pedestrian crossings. And so we might want to be thinking about all of our bus stop locations around the city that have been in areas where we've put in some of these new pedestrian crossings, particularly the ones with the flashing lights, that it might make sense in some cases to move a bus stop that was cited for some other reason closer to those. That'd be great. So thank you for looking into that. Much appreciated.
Nice idea. Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and in the spirit of not exactly what we're talking about tonight, but related, I just want to remind everybody too that we have this transit innovation study that we completed a while back, and it's kind of been moving along at the same time as this short-range transit plan. And so there are a lot of other improvements to ways that you can communicate with the bus system, ways that you can pay for your fares, as well as improvements that we plan to make to the bus shelters and things like that that will be coming in the future. And just to turn it back to staff, that is all still happening in the background, and the prioritization that we make here isn't going to impact our ability to move forward on a different timeline with some of those other improvements, correct?
Correct. This plan is in a lot of ways complementary to the innovation study, and it might be good timing that we're talking about it because we're working right now on essentially a progress report. It's been a year already since the transit innovation study came before council as another study session, but we want to make sure people are aware that we're making progress on the high and medium priority items in particular, and how they relate to things like the short-range transit plan, how they make paying better, how they make receiving information easier. So that will be coming out hopefully with sometime middle of March.
Thank you for all the work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we are done with these special meeting. And we will see you all next week. Yes, that's next week on March 4th at 5:30 right here in the council chambers. Thank you so much. Good night.